Hello and welcome back to Meet Mozart. I'm Angie, that's Mozart, and today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite classical music genres, art song. So art song is really the English term for the genre, but a song in Spanish would be called a canción, in French we have mélodie, Italian is canzone, and in German Lieder. Not to be confused with Leder, as in lederhosen, but song pants would be pretty awesome. But no matter what language an art song is in, there are a few components that really make it the special art form that it is. First of all, it's intended to be performed in a recital setting, which means that there are no costumes, there's no props or sets. It's really an opportunity for the audience to focus on hearing the text set to music and experiencing that music through the voice and piano. So the creation of art song really starts with the text. Most composers are not also lyricists, so they pull from pre-existing pieces. And in most cases, that means pulling from poetry. And the reason for that is that poetry already has a rhyme scheme. It's already got a meter and a rhythm, and there's even a bit of a melody set into the language. So a composer could take a poetic text and use that structure to create a song. And it's really interesting to see how those two art forms have sort of grown together and evolved over the years. You know, art song really hit its heyday in the 1800s. And if you were a German composer writing music in the 1800s, you were going to take text from someone like Goethe. Or if you were French, you were going to use Victor Hugo, or English might use W.B. Yeats, and American might use Emily Dickinson. And so on and so forth throughout the years until we've reached the modern day, where contemporary composers are setting the texts of contemporary poets. And as that whole thing has changed, and as the poetic form has changed, it's really influenced the music that is created through that poetry. Where once there was this very strong structure that a composer could follow, now that the poetic form has freed up, you know, they can't quite set it the same way. And so if you go to hear a contemporary art song, you might notice, oh, it's a little harder for me to follow along with that rhythm, or the melody was a little unexpected, or something along those lines. And although there are lots of musical reasons for that, you know, as musicians try to push boundaries and create something new, it also has to do with the influence of how the poetic form changed and how it became freer. And as the poetic form became freer, composers became more and more comfortable with setting texts that weren't even poetry. So you might find that a composer set a letter, or perhaps an excerpt from a longer literary work. So the variety of text has really opened up, but at its heart, poetry will always be the main source for the text of art song. So the next major part of art song is the role of the piano. Perhaps you have had to go or taken your child to solo and ensemble contest, and you may remember having to run around and try to find yourself an accompanist, right? Well, in art song, we don't refer to the pianist as an accompanist. We refer to him or her as a collaborative pianist. And that's because in order to really bring an art song to life, it's really an equal partnership between the singer and the pianist. In fact, I had a poetry teacher that once described poetry in what I thought was just the most beautiful way. Was that, you know, as opposed to a novel or something of a longer literary form where you have a beginning, middle, and end, poetry is really using words to try to create a specific image and a specific moment in time. It's almost like they're using words to create a painting. Applying that idea to art song, you know, in most cases, the pianist is going to come in with a little piano introduction. And so you can kind of imagine that the piano part is sort of giving you the broad strokes. It's setting up the color scheme. It's setting up sort of the outline of what this poem is going to be about. And a composer can use the piano to create that outline by using several different elements. You know, one of course is the rhythm. So perhaps the song is about a boat and you might feel there's a little bit of a lilt in the rhythm there. Or another way is by choosing the types of harmonies. So if it's major or minor or another mode, that's going to kind of give us a clue into, is this, you know, a happier song or a sadder one? Is it really passionate or somber? And another way, which is probably my favorite way, is to take an element of the poetry and represent that element through a figure in the piano. So, for example, if the poetry is about a little bird, you might have a figure in the piano part, perhaps in the high notes, that might remind you of a little bird chirping. And so through the piano, we start to kind of set up the broad strokes, we set up the emotional tone of what this song is going to be about. So the last element in our little art song puzzle here is, of course, the singer. The singer has the responsibility of conveying the text. And if we look at that in comparison to this analogy of the painting, you know, the piano has set up all these broad strokes, but the singer is coming in and putting in all of the really specific detail, right? So we finally learned that that figure that's been forming has blue eyes. And in terms of how they use their voice, because this was coming up at the same time as opera, it's traditionally done more in an operatic vocal style. So we're going to use a little bit more of that head resonance. But it has evolved as well. Just like art song and poetry evolved together, art song and the voice have evolved together as well. So nowadays you might hear an art song that pulls a little bit of cabaret stylings, and so the singer might have a few jazz effects in their vocals. Or they could do something that we call extended techniques, which basically means using your voice in a lot of ways that aren't singing. So you might be panting or screeching or simply kind of intoning the text rather than actually singing it. So the vocal style has really grown and changed as well, even though, again, traditionally it's going to be sung in more of that operatic, classical vocal style. All right, so that wraps up our little intro to art song. I hope that you found it helpful and amusing and interesting. And if you did, please be sure to like and comment and subscribe and just push all the fun buttons. And we will see you next time for a really special video. We're going to deep dive into one of the most prolific art song composers, Franz Schubert. So be sure to join us again on the 15th for that.